Let's be honest. The hardest part of Zoom isn't the tech. It's that moment when you ask a question and nothing. You hear crickets. Cameras are off. The chat is silent. Everyone's muted. No one's unmuting. You feel like you're teaching, pitching, or presenting to a void. And if that happens to you, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just using Zoom like it's a lecture hall instead of a participation room. Before we wrap up today, we'll discuss the built-in Zoom tools that turn cameras off or mute-only meetings into real participation without begging people to engage. You're listening to the Virtually Reimagined podcast. This is where we're creating success leading from anywhere. If you're ready to learn how to build connection, confidence, and success in the digital space, you've come to the right podcast. Let's get started. So I couldn't wait to do a podcast on engagement because it is one of the most frequently asked questions. How do I get more people to type in the chat? How do I get them to answer questions? How do I know what they're thinking? They're not in the room with me. I can't even walk over to them, put my hand on their shoulder or see what they're writing. So how is this done? And why is it such an issue? Well, when you think about it, when we're virtual and pretty much you're looking into this camera and all you see is this gallery of rectangles, video thumbnails is what they are, but they're all live video feeds, right? We can see everybody in their room. And even worse, when you have half the people off camera. For those of you out there who do lead Zoom meetings and maybe they're free events where people come to listen, but they're not even on camera. I mean, there are some of my followers out there and those listening in. I know you're listening in about how to make your Zooms more engaging when they are classes and everyone's on camera. In many cases, you have to be on camera to get the credit from the class. So now they're on camera, but everybody's staring right into that camera and no one's engaging. I mean, think about it. When you're in person, when's the last time you had to stand arm's length away from someone and stare right into their eyes for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours? It just doesn't happen. And when you're in a physical classroom, that scenario doesn't happen either. They're looking down, they have their pen, they're writing notes. You're the instructor, you're looking down, you're looking out. It's a very different experience. So, with all of that said, it's so important to figure out a way to get engaging techniques and use them in your Zoom meetings. And some of the things I put together today are things that you're going to want to use immediately. And it all starts, though, with setting up your room, setting up your classroom, setting up your stage, setting up your conference room, setting up your office, whatever it is, this environment, this virtual environment, but setting it up to a participant focused environment. So think about a participation mode, even before you start or especially before you start. And think about this question. Why does Zoom engagement start in your account? It does. It starts in your account settings. It doesn't start in your slide deck. That's not where it starts when you're in Zoom. When you are in a virtual environment, it starts in your account settings, because in order to set up that participation focused environment, you have to make sure that Zoom knows that you want to use the built-in tools that we're about to talk about today. And some of these tools that I love, some of my favorite Zoom things are the waiting room for sure, because when you're out there and you are clicking that link to join my meeting, maybe 15 minutes before start time, I want to know you're there. And then I want to engage with you immediately. So I'm going to hype up that room, that waiting room, in a way that is engaging. I'm also going to use the chat. There's a chat in the waiting room in addition to the main meeting room. I may even give you some tasks to do in the chat, and we're going to talk about that. So stay with us. Some of the other built-in tools are in the meeting settings, and like one of them would be using reactions. There's actually something called a reaction. It uses emojis, and you have to have this on. If you don't have it on, you can't use it. So some of the things I've done are using the rename function. So in a Zoom meeting, it's very common if you were to picture those rectangles, like that person's live video feed, right? Where you're like, hey, hi, I see you, right? And in the bottom corner of that little video thumbnail is their name. Well, you can use that option. You can actually have everybody rename themselves to like their favorite superhero, their favorite character. Maybe what character are they going to take on for the next 10 minutes? And you can role play. Maybe you are role playing for your industry and you're going to have them rename themselves for that case study or role play. There's also a feature in the settings, so you have to turn it on, that involves what's called nonverbal feedback. Okay, nonverbal. When someone's muted, they can actually give you feedback without unmuting and speaking. Because inside a Zoom meeting, it's hard to control when everyone's talking at the same time. How are you going to control your thought leadership at that moment if everyone's talking? Now, in a physical classroom or lecture hall or conference room, it's a much different case. If everyone's talking at the same time, maybe you've given them time to chit chat, with their neighbor and find out about them. It's very possible. And so that chit chatter that you hear in a room is very different than when it comes through in a Zoom call. So the way to get engagement, get feedback from everyone in a nonverbal way is to use what I call the green for yes, red for no. And I'll be talking about that before we wrap up today. And it's in the settings. So if you don't go there first and turn it on, you won't have it as an option. And many times I'll get on with some of you, those of you out there who have been in a private coaching session with me so that we're working one-on-one with your Zoom setup. You say, hey, Betsy, I need to set this up before we go live. And I'm giving you the guidance and you're saying, well, I don't have that button. And we're live on a Zoom together. And that's because that tool has not been turned on inside your settings. So number one, first and foremost, go into your settings. They're located in the Zoom web portal. And if you want, leave me a comment here as to which setting gave you an aha. Like, I didn't even know that was there. And I'll give you a hint. There's one all the way at the bottom, all the way, almost all the way, called focus mode. And in addition to focus mode, there is live streaming. In addition to live streaming, there's virtual backgrounds and there's filter overlays all at the bottom. And that's all in the advanced section. And when you get down to that area, you might be like, I didn't even know these were here. So go through. If you're wondering what all these settings are, if you're listening in right now and you want a copy of my free Zoom Mastery checklist, look in the description of this episode and we'll put the link there. You can grab a copy. It walks you through all of the different settings and why you would need them when you go live. I actually put my best practices in there. My top list of what do I do prior to going live. There's certain checkpoints that I do. So if you want a copy of that, we'll put the link in the description for you. And so wrapping up this first note about how do you fix engagement is to think about the first 60 seconds and how you want them to participate. Could be something like type where you're joining from and what you want to walk away with today. Engage with them. Where are you from? What company are you with? And what do you want to walk away with today? And the answer could be given back to you either in text in the chat or in a survey link. You could actually put a link in the chat. That could be in the waiting room chat or in the main meeting room chat. And yes, you're like, what is a survey? How do I make a survey? We're going to be talking about that as one of our points today. And then for those of you who are listening in right now and want to join us over on the YouTube channel, you'll find this there as well. You can watch the same episode, but you can also check out our videos on the YouTube channel, which is called the Zoom Playground. And you'll find a video there, our most recent video on how to create surveys. So lots of tutorials that are helpful to mapping out this journey. How do I make it engaging? What's my first step, second step, third step? Map out your meeting so you know exactly what you're going to do. All right, so let's move on to what I brought up as the second point in fixing engagement. We got to up it, got to bring that engagement up. It improves motivation to learn. They stay with you. It keeps them in attendance for those who don't have to stay to the end for credit and you want them to stay on because you're maybe pitching your new offer and you want them to stay on, make it engaging. It increases attendance. So the second one involves the chat. and this is chat engagement. And so I want you to think about turning your chat inside Zoom into almost like a second screen for your participants and not a distraction. So oftentimes that chat can be a distraction because people are commenting and talking to one another. And that's what brings me to this area, because to really hone in on engagement, you want to make sure that they know ahead of time that they can format in the chat, so they can make their text a different color. They can put emojis in the chat. They can turn their text bold, change the size of their text in the chat, or they can chat to everyone versus just the host. And then, of course, they can save the chat. So all of these, again, all of this as we talk, all refers back to our first step today, which is setting up that room, making sure you have all these features on ahead of time. And then think about techniques. Think about the questions that you're going to ask ahead of time and when you're going to ask them. And in the chat, it's important to give them practice, maybe at the very beginning, right? Shake it all out. Tell us where you're from. And hey, while you're typing in the chat, don't hit enter yet until I count down. And then first of all, you can watch the chat and see who's listening, kind of have fun with that. And then say it again. I'm going to ask you a question. When you type your answer in the chat, don't hit enter yet. A little side note, when you hit enter in the chat, their text appears and then it's choppy, right? Their answers are not all together. And so when you count down and then they all hit enter. So again, a way to see who is listening. You can use the chat for little micro commitments, holding people accountable, right? One word answers. Give me an A or a B. Are you a yes or a no? Answer with an emoji. You can also ask them, write your next step in the chat so that you actually do it. And then maybe this is a group cohort that's working together. And if everyone has their accountability step in the chat and then everybody saves the chat, this is a way to follow up with one another, build community. So the engagement doesn't only start in the meeting and continue, but it continues afterward. So one example would be, give me a one-word answer to this question. How confident do you feel right now? And then see what you see there. I've often said, drop a 1 if you've ever felt Zoom fatigue. Drop a 2 if this is your first time on Zoom, things like that. You can see the 1s and the 2s. The next area, number 3, as I've laid out these amazing tips for you to fix engagement. Number 3 is in using the built-in tools of the survey area inside Zoom. So when you go there on your Zoom web portal, you'll see surveys on the left-hand side, but that whole area breaks it down into 3 different features you can use. A survey, which gives you a link that you can share when they're in the waiting room, because you can't launch a poll in the waiting room, but you can take a survey link and you can put that in the chat in the waiting room. You can even put it in an email before they arrive. So the engagement can start, 2 hours before you go live. Say, hey, looking forward to seeing you. We go live in 2 hours. First step is to click this link and fill out the survey. We have just a few questions for you. And then you get real-time feedback when those surveys are filled in immediately. So when you have that hour before the class and you go in, you're going to see everybody's answers. In addition to surveys, are polls. Polls have to be launched in the live meeting room. They can't be launched in a breakout room or a waiting room. So they're launched in the live meeting room and it appears on everyone's screen and you get real-time feedback. You can see who is participating, what percentage of the room. You can see what percentages have answered yes, what percentages have answered no. You can make it anonymous. You can print a report out after. So many great features. You can even take a poll and turn it into a quiz so that you give them a multiple choice, but actually which one is the right answer as their teacher, instructor, educator, thought leader. And you can ask them to take this quick quiz to see where you're at just before we go to break. I need everyone to finish it before we go. And the quiz lets them see how they did, which answer was correct, instead of just taking a poll and guessing and they're not sure if they got the right answer or not. And quizzes must be launched in live Zoom meetings. So these polls wake people up, right? It interrupts that passive listening, right? We're not going for a lecture hall. We're going for that participation room. And that passive listening, even as you hear my voice today, you're listening and listening and it's the same tone. When I change my tone or I get louder or I get softer, or maybe I pause like that, does wake people up. And when you launch a poll, you stop talking for most of the time. And so there are 3 types of polls that I would want you to take a look at and create for yourselves. That pulse check, right? Check the energy in the room for clarity. Someone foggy on a topic that you talked about or not? Is everybody pretty clear? Prediction polls, like you're kind of pre-assessing. So what do you think is going to happen next? And then decision polls. So which path should we take? And you can give them those questions. And all of these polls should be entered way ahead of time, because I don't want you having to deal with typing the questions while they're all in the room or about to enter the room. I want you to think these out ahead of time and then enter them in. And Zoom lets you do that. You can put them in your poll area way ahead of time and they're saved. All right, next up, number 4 on our list is using reactions. And that is a built-in tool. And there's also nonverbal feedback. So those 2 work together. And I would say, let's put the raise hand under here too, because these are all buttons. Gets them to look down, not at you. So they're not necessarily looking at their phone or, away from you, in the room somewhere, but they're looking at their buttons on their Zoom toolbar. And the reactions gives them different emojis to show their emotion. And these can be animated. You can urge them to use these throughout your session. And then there's nonverbal feedback. That's the green circle for yes, red circle for no. And as the host, you get a tally. And so you can quickly say, well, I can see that we've got 84 of you said yes and 12 of you said no. And then you can answer to that. So you get an immediate tally. These reactions, they're the best way to keep flow while still getting responses. So you can keep talking. You can easily clear all feedback and go on to the next question, as long as you have your questions maybe laid out on the slide that you're sharing so people can see the question. And then all they have to do is answer yes or no. This really gets the audience to practice and trains them to use reactions like they're voting, like a voting button. And you can ask them to give you a thumbs up if you're going at the right pace. You can ask them to raise their hand if they have a question. Really good one. Because if someone has a question and you want to keep the flow of your presentation and you know that you're looking for the raise hand, it's an easy way to pause and then take all questions. Now, some of you out there, I've heard from you and you like to have everything unmuted. You want it to be an open room. You find that muting and unmuting takes away from the flow. And I think that's a beautiful thing. You can certainly just leave everyone unmuted like you are in a physical room together, but these reactions can be reinforced at this time when you're trying to give feedback. I want to give feedback to the instructor. I don't necessarily have to speak up. I can put something in the chat or I can give them a reaction. And some of the common ones are, give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen clearly. So you kind of get the thumbs up. We got it. Use raise hand if you want me to show you the step-by-step instructions for this case study. And so everybody puts their raise hand on, and then you can clear all feedback as the host or co-host. A couple seconds, you're on to the next question. All right. So in addition to reactions and nonverbal feedback, our next one involves breakout rooms. And this is the fastest way to create a bond and real connection in your virtual event on Zoom. It's what sets Zoom apart from the rest, in my opinion, is the breakout rooms feature. So you're taking them from the main meeting room and you're breaking them up into smaller groups. And when they arrive in the breakout room, they can see each other, they can unmute, they can turn their camera off if they wanted to. But for the most part, they're going to turn cameras on, especially if you ask them to. They cannot hear you in the main meeting room, and engagement begins immediately in a way that they feel like they are side by side or in front of each other, sitting there in a room physically when they're not. So it gets it very close to that in-person experience. You can also use timers and you can allow them to return to the main meeting room or not. So there are settings for that. You can, again, set it up to be a participation zone so that you know that they're either sharing screen, which they can do in a breakout room, or that they're all on camera. And one of the settings that I love the best, again, in your Zoom account, lets you see the feedback as a host or co-host. You can see whether their cameras are on or off. Can't see them, but you can see icons, status, like a status of whether their cameras are on or off. Beautiful. And if you want more about breakout rooms, that's another thing to leave for me in the comments here. send me a comment. It could be, I've never done these before. What are they? And we have an event coming up where we simulate this, and we do it 4 times a year in our Zoom Business Academy. And if it's not time for the Academy, you can also join us in the collective. We meet in live Zoom meetings, which is the perfect way to experience breakout rooms. You got to be in a Zoom meeting live with me and a like-minded community in order to try these techniques out. Watching our YouTube tutorials is also another fantastic way to learn. However, learning breakouts is different when you're actually in them. So let me know where you're at on that feature. And breakouts, they definitely break that Zoom fatigue. You actually can say, I'm going to pair you up. We're going to do a case study, or we're going to do an exercise. Here are the instructions. And then when they go into the breakout rooms, you can even share your screen into the breakouts so that they can see the instructions, hear your voice. They can't see your face unless you have pre-recorded yourself on video, which you can share into the breakouts. Fantastic. You can do what we call pair and share. That's an active teaching technique. And you can tell them you have 90 seconds, go, and they have to do this exercise. Sometimes I do a tic-tac-toe type game, and they have to fill in the grid, not with X's and O's, but with what they've learned so far. You can do a teach back, which is explain it like I'm new. So the person has to explain it like if I just taught you waiting rooms and what their purpose is. And then maybe my exercises, you have to teach that to someone else, because maybe at the end of this class, you have to go teach waiting rooms to someone. And you can also do a hot seat. Now, a hot seat, you're not necessarily going to be in control of that because you're not going to be in the breakouts and you can't see anyone. But you can actually go to each breakout room and visit in and ask one person to share, and then others help out. You can also do that when they come back from the breakout rooms. You can say, I've given each of you the opportunity to come back and give a summary, and they can debrief that way. Okay, so if it's not going to be in the chat, it's not going to be a reaction or raising hand or a survey, a poll, or a quiz, then perhaps you're going to use the whiteboard, the Zoom whiteboard, for fixing engagement and seeing that motivation to learn just soar. Because a whiteboard simulates that big board or screen you would have behind you if you were in a physical room or a physical conference room. And you can write on it. You can draw concepts. You can make it so that everybody sees it. It's the main focus in the meeting, but they can also take a copy with them. And it can be a collaborative board where they all have it in their own Zoom accounts if you've set it up that way. And so you can, if you see these people multiple times over a course of maybe 2 months, you can say, we're going to use our board. And that's where you put in your project or your homework. And the act of drawing on the screen is called annotating. And so I would separate these two in that you can use a whiteboard, but you can also annotate on anything you're sharing that is static, like a slide in your slide deck. So in your PowerPoint presentation or in a Canva presentation, although Canva does have its own built-in tools, so does PowerPoint. I always stick with Zoom. I just want the same tools so I can do it quickly. And those of you out there who have attended one of my live Zooms, you have seen me do this frequently. And if you're out there, you have not attended one of my live Zooms, please come check us out using the collective. You can even join us for 1 month, and you'll see, especially if you're seeking this technology support and help. You could be very tech savvy, somewhat tech savvy, or not tech savvy. And we cover all levels. And again, I use the annotation quite a bit because I want to be there. It's almost as if I'm looking over your shoulder at your computer screen. So you literally could share your screen into my meeting and I could annotate on yours. Like sometimes I'll say to people, well, you see there in the upper left corner, there's the file menu. Like you need to learn where to click, where to go. I can actually draw an arrow on the screen to show you where to click. Sometimes it's this, see those 3 dots down there? And the person's saying, I don't see them. I don't see them. And so I can draw an arrow to them. What if you're describing a website to people? Maybe it's going through a contract of some kind. You're not there necessarily to sign it, but maybe you want to go through and circle items to focus on. Annotating lets you draw circles, squares, arrows, lines. Definite way to engage. And so I ask them using a stamp tool that's on the annotation tools. Use that stamp Stamp a heart in that quadrant of the screen if you vote for that item. Which of these items was your favorite so far today? Give me a gold star. And those stamping tools are on their annotation toolbar. So they have this tool that they can use to engage with you. So all of this active learning happens when they interact, not when they watch. They're just watching you. They start to, get a little sleepy. It is the action you want to get them to be actively learning. Again, circle the right answer on the screen, draw a line from the problem to the solution. I could give you 2 columns of phrases and people could take turns. And that brings us to screen sharing. You want to engage? You want to have engagement in your Zoom meetings? Do a screen share that invites participation and is not a slideshow marathon. All right. And I know some of you out there have told me you've been provided a PowerPoint presentation that you have to use, and it has, 450 slides. So we got to break it down. We got to figure out how to get this to be more engaging. And in screen share, we've got portion of screen, we've got sharing sound, we've got sharing video. You can do advanced share options. You can show from another camera. You can use a document device where you're using a document camera. And if you want to know more about sharing screen, check out our video on our Zoom Playground YouTube channel. It's a fantastic way to start. And we'll put the link to that video in the description, an easy way to get to it. So as our final note, talking about this engaging fix, how do I up it? How do I get engagement woven into my meetings so it's happening frequently? And when you're using screen sharing, the real issue isn't the screen share. The issue is if it's passive screen sharing, where if it's on the screen and you're just talking, and they're going to lose interest. They're going to start looking at something in their own physical environment. Instead, it can be an engagement-friendly screen share, like showing them a choice, letting them vote, pull up the annotation, tell them to use their reactions, tell them to put it in the chat. Hey, throw up a poll. You can use things like spot the difference between these two. What do you notice? You can put up pictures on a slide that have no text and ask them, what do they notice? And then tell them how you want them to respond. You could say, raise your hand. And it could be a timing thing. Who raises their hand first? You could have incentive for a prize at the end of the class. So I want you to see that every 2 minutes, max 3, you're going to ask for a response inside Zoom using these tools. That's your 2-minute rule. And so when you conquer this engagement rhythm, right, the 2-minute rule, little micro interactions, chats, reactions, annotate. And then every 10 minutes, throw up a poll, swap it out with a quiz, do a quick activity, put them into breakout rooms for 10 minutes, and then come back. Visit them when they're in the breakout rooms so you can see what's going on. And then once, make sure that when you have them in the breakout rooms, you've asked them to come back and someone is going to give a debrief of what happened in there. And always make participation the default. That's what is to be expected every time. It's not the bonus. So if you take nothing else from today, remember this: when the cameras are off and the chat goes silent, it's not a you problem or a tech problem. It's a participation plan problem. And now you have the tools to fix it. So thanks for tuning in to the Virtually Reimagined podcast. I hope today's episode gave you a spark of inspiration for your own virtual business journey. If you loved what you heard, make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and share it with a friend who's building their own dream online. And until next time, keep creating success, leading from anywhere.